Hey guys, in today's video I want to show this incredibly powerful solo Necromancer build I've been using to solo hard mode veteran dungeons. You can also use it to solo world bosses, Harrowstorms, dragons, etc. And this build absolutely obliterates them, because it was made for solving dungeons, which are far more difficult than any overland content. If you want to see this build in action, you can look at this video, where I solo Scarecrow Peak in veteran hard mode difficulty. The build is also on my website, so if you prefer written guides over YouTube videos, you can read it there instead. The link will be in the description. In this guide, I'll be regularly using the terms regular and difficult. Regular refers to content that is intended to be soloed, such as Maelstrom Arena or Vateshran Arena, and to any overland content, such as world bosses, Dolmens, dragons, Volcanic Vents, Harrowstorms, Mirrormoor Incursions, etc. Difficult refers to soloing 4-man content, such as dungeons. But even then, some of the easier dungeons would fall under the regular category. The line between regular and difficult isn't very rigid though. If you're struggling with a world boss, you can't just use the difficult skill and gear setups, which will have better survivability at the cost of having less damage. So let's start with skill setups. This is the regular skill setup. All front bar skills are from the Gravelord skill line, in order to boost Corpse Burster and Death Knell passive. Detonating Siphon is an ability that consumes a corpse to form a tether between it and you, which deals damage over 20 seconds and grants you major savagery and prophecy. When the ability ends or is reactivated, the corpse explodes, dealing additional damage. Use it whenever there's a corpse available, to trigger Corpse Burster. Gravelord Sacrifice is an ability that summons a skeleton that will charge at you after 2.5 seconds, creating a corpse and granting you a 20-second buff that increases your damage done with Necromancer abilities and dots by 15%. It will also cause your empowered Venom Skull casts to generate a corpse. Venom Skull is a spammable that will deal more damage every third Necromancer ability cast, and thanks to Gravelord Sacrifice, this empowered cast will also create a corpse. Avid Boneyard is a ground dot that applies minor vulnerability to all enemies inside of it, increasing their damage taken by 5%. It also grants you the Grave Robber synergy, which you can use yourself. It can consume a corpse to deal more damage, which will also proc Corpse Burster. Skeletal Archer is an ability that summons an archer to attack your enemies, grants you major brutality and sorcery for 20 seconds, which increase your weapon and spell damage by 20%, and triggers the Undead Confederate passive. It also creates a corpse when it expires. Pestilent Colossus is an ultimate that we won't be using, but we'll keep it slotted on our front bar to boost Corpse Burster and Death Knell passive. Summoner's Armor is an ability that will grant you major and minor resolve, increasing your armor by almost 9000, and reduces the cost of your Gravelord Sacrifice and Skeletal Archer by 15%. It also triggers the Disdain Harm passive, which reduces your damage taken from dots by 15%. It will also create a corpse when it expires. Barb Trap is a dot that will also apply Hemorrhaging stats effect at the start and grant you minor force buff, increasing your critical damage by 10%. Next we have Elemental Susceptibility, an extremely loaded ability that does a multitude of things. First of all, it's completely free to cast, so it helps us sustain. Second, it applies Major Breach, which reduces enemies' armor by 5948, which is a massive damage increase. And third, it applies Burning, Chilled, and Concussed stats effects at the beginning and then every 7.5 seconds. All of these stats effects deal decent damage, but Concussed will also apply minor vulnerability for 4 seconds, increasing enemies' damage taken by 5%. Chilled will also apply minor maim for 4 seconds, reducing enemies' damage done by 5%, and it will also apply minor brittle for 4 seconds, if you were on your Ice Staff bar, while the Chilled effect procced, which is always going to happen at the beginning when you cast Elemental Susceptibility. Minor Brittle increases critical damage taken by 10%. The Chilled proc will also synergize with our next ability. Elemental Blockade will constantly apply our backbar enchant, in this case the weapon damage enchantment. It will also constantly apply Minor Breach to enemies who are chilled, and they will be chilled thanks to Elemental Susceptibility. Soul Burst, with the Flame, Lingering Torment and Courage combination on it, is an AoE dot that also grants you the minor Courage buff, which increases your weapon and spell damage by 215. Use Scalding Rune instead, if you don't have access to Scribing. Shooting Star is a powerful ultimate that deals AoE damage, leaves a ground dot behind, and restores 12 ultimate for each enemy hit with the initial hit. Now as for situational skills, we have Resolving Vigor. You can use it instead of Soul Burst for more difficult fights, where you need the heal over time. Now moving on to the difficult skill setup. I'm only going to mention abilities that change compared to regular setup. Revealing Flare will passively grant you major protection, reducing your damage taken by 10%. It will also trigger the Magicite passive, which increases magical recovery by 10%. Temporal Guard is an ultimate that we won't be using. but we'll keep it slotted for the passive Minor Protection, which decreases your damage taken by 5%. It will also trigger the Concentrated Barrier passive. Ulf's Contingency, with the Bleed, Gladiator's Tenacity, and Force combination on it, is a delayed AoE damage that also grants you 8% damage reduction for 8 seconds, and Minor Force for 22 seconds, which increases your critical damage by 10%. You should recast it every 8 seconds when under pressure, and every 22 seconds otherwise. Use Barb Trap instead, if you don't have access to Scribing. Spirit Guardian is an ability that will summon a Wraith that reduces your damage taken by 10%, heals you every 2 seconds, and triggers the Undead Confederate passive. It will also create a corpse when it expires. Now as for situational skills, Resolving Vigor is still a good situational skill, but this time it will be replacing Avid Boneyard. Moving on to gear. This is the beginner setup, made with only crafted sets, so you can easily buy them off of guild stores, or ask someone to craft them for you, or craft them yourself, if you have researched enough. The two 5-piece sets we'll want to use are Order's Wrath and Claw of the Forest Wraith. Order's Wrath is just insanely powerful, and will stay relevant even as you move away from beginner setups. Forest Wraith not so much, but is the next best option. On weapons, you'll want to use 2 pieces of the Assassin's Guile set, just to trigger the 2-piece critical chance bonus. It doesn't have to be Assassin's Guile, it could be any set with 2-piece crit chance bonus, but I'm showing Assassin's Guile here because it needs the lowest amount of research traits to craft. On the image you can see that the traits are Training/Divines. Divines will straight up make you stronger, but if you're a new player, I think it's worth to sacrifice a tiny bit of power to get more experience gain, so you can level up faster. Use Daggers instead of Dagger and Mace if you don't plan on using this gear setup for any instance content. For ranged build, replace Dagger and Mace with a bow of the same set with Precise trait and Absorb Stamina enchant. This is the regular gear setup. Order's Wrath is an extremely powerful set, despite being crafted, so it's a good replacement for Ansul's Torment if you don't have access to it. Velothi Urmage's Amulet can give you much more DPS, at the cost of survivability. You can use it instead of Ring of the Pale Order when doing easier content. And this is the gear setup for extremely difficult content. Olorim provides 430 weapon and spell damage, which is a lot, and it will provide us with the minor Aegis buff, reducing our damage taken by 5%. You can change some, or all of the stamina enchants to health ones, for extremely hard hitting bosses. Moving on to champion points. In the blue tree, you'll want to use Master at Arms, Biting Aura, Fighting Finesse, and Wrathful Strikes. When soloing extremely difficult dungeons, you should replace Wrathful Strikes and Fighting Finesse with 2 of the 4 mitigation slotables that match the fight's damage type, so Ironclad, Duelist Rebuff, Unassailable, and Enduring Resolve. Huge majority of the times is going to be Ironclad and Duelist's Rebuff. In the red tree, you'll want to use Bundles of Vitality, Sustained by Suffering, Rejuvenation, and Fortified. In fights with lots of adds, Siphoning spells and Bloody Renewal can be stronger than Rejuvenation and Sustained by Suffering. Moving on to race. When it comes to solo PvE, you need both damage and survivability, so pretty much all races have useful racials. The best race for dealing damage is Khajiit. While the critical damage from Feline Ambush can sometimes be wasted, due to critical damage being capped at 125%, it will never happen in solo content, because there will be no tanks or healers, providing you with the major force buff. The best race for survivability, and what I am using, is Nord. The Rugged racial will provide around 6% damage mitigation. Moving on to Mundus. For overland content, you should use the Shadow Mundus, which increases your critical damage. For instance content, you should use the Lover Mundus, which increases your penetration. For extremely difficult dungeons, you should consider switching to the Lady Mundus, which increases your armor. Now attributes. For most content, you should put all 64 points into stamina. For difficult content, you should devote as many attribute points as necessary to health. For some content you'll be able to get away with 32 health, 32 stamina. For the extremely difficult stuff, you'll need 64 health. Moving on to food. Most of the time, you should use the Orzorga Smoked Bear Haunch. Jewels of Mistral is a cheaper alternative that provides only slightly lower stats. As for other alternatives, Braised Rabbit with Spring Vegetables will increase your max stamina at the cost of recoveries, and the max stamina will increase your DPS. Use it if your sustain is good enough, without Orzorga Smoked Bear Haunch. Moving on to potions. Most of the time you should use Tri-Stat potions. They will greatly improve your sustain. You can craft them by combining Columbine, Bugloss, and Mountain Slaver. You should instead use the Spell Power potions, when you switch to the difficult skill setup. That's because this setup gets rid of Skeletal Archer in order to fit in Revealing Flare, so you'll need to get Major Sorcery from your potions instead. You can craft them by combining Lady Smoke, Namira's Rot, and Cornflower. There are better potions, but they're extremely expensive. Heroism potions can provide 100% uptime on minor heroism buff, which generates ultimate. But they're extremely expensive because they're crafted by combining Dragon Rheum, Dragon's Blood, and Columbine. In situations where you need more damage mitigation and you can spare some sustain, you can instead use the Armor potions, which will increase your armor by 5280. You can craft them by combining Bagloss, Mountain's Flower, and Mudcrab Chitin. And that's it for this video. If you have any more questions, you can comment down below or join our Discord server Wildheart. As always, feedback will be appreciated. If you enjoyed this video, make sure to subscribe to my channel and check out my Twitch. Thanks for watching and see you next time.